Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 3 of our story tonight, and we're about to find out about two boys who have just discovered that their father has been nursing a secret about a Bigfoot encounter he'd had when he was a young boy himself. So before we continue with part 3 of our story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with our story tonight. "But why did the Erikins abandon their own house?" my mother asked. "I've always wondered about the old place. I mean, it's been left derelict for years, hasn't it? And think about it, it's situated on a magnificent piece of land, and it's a 15-minute walk from here. Only 10 minutes away from your parents' place. If someone bulldozed that house and rebuilt it all over again, cleaning up the premises, it would be a very good investment if you ask me. Would make a sizable amount of money, I'm most sure. I'm sure the land itself must be quite valuable. I mean, if I was a member of the Erikson family, and I didn't want to remain in my home, I'd put the place up for sale like any normal person would, and make some good money out of it. Instead, they leave their house, allowing it to rot. They never return to it again. I'm sorry, but I don't care how rich you are. Abandoning your home like that and not selling it is profoundly strange. No one has visited the place for years." "Well, I'm sure they must have had good reasons for not selling their property," said my father. "I know after what me and my brother experienced, we never dared go back to the place again. I was 16 years old at the time, you know. Many of the local kids were saying that the reason the Eriksons had up and left their property was because it was haunted. They believed there was an angry ghost on the property. One of the kids in the year below me at school said that he knew Tony Erikson very well. Tony Erikson was the oldest son of the family, I believe. Apparently he would tirelessly complain about loud banging sounds that would disturb them during the night. Apparently the family would get up out of bed and go and check the noises. They would open their door in the middle of the night, and nothing would be there, which they found incredibly airy. Not only that, but strange things were left on their doorstep. Stones, twigs, made out to look like cryptic kind of messages, as if they were being told to get the hell out of their house. That's how I think they saw it." "Well, that is incredibly creepy," said my mother. "The other night, I have to admit, when Mrs. Sanderson banged on our door so very loudly, I'm not going to kid when I tell you I thought we were being visited by the Grim Reaper himself. So if I were hearing banging sounds at our door every night like we did with Mrs. Sanderson, I would consider selling up straight away. I don't like mysteries, especially when they can't be solved. But at the very least, I would put the house on the market, not forsake it, in the way the Eriksons did." "I know exactly what you mean, Mum. I freaked the hell out when Mrs. Sanderson came to the door in the middle of the night like that. The way she banged the door, it was so loud, so terrifying. I began to fear the very worst. I wanted to hide under my bed. I thought someone insidiously evil was standing outside our front door. It was such a relief to find it was Mrs. Sanderson, but boy, didn't she look half rattled." "Well, then, maybe, son, you can fully appreciate what the Erikson family was going through at the time. I can't imagine it myself. Someone would knock at their front door at the dead of night, making an awful racket and commotion. And when they went to the door, nothing was ever there. Can you imagine how airy that must have been for them?" "I can't imagine," I agreed. "That must have been terrifying." "Well, anyway, the story about the strange elusive knocking that would occur at the Erikson house at the dead of night went around our school like wildfire when I was a boy. People tended to talk a lot, and it was rumoured that the Erikson house was obviously haunted. People believed that one night the demonic activity got so bad and so aggressive in the house that the Ericsons simply fled. Everybody liked to talk about the Ericsons' house when I was a kid. People would make up crazy stories about ghosts and ghoulies that were probably lurking on the property. Before long, many of the locals were referring to the Ericson house as the haunted house. At first, me and my brother Gareth would talk together for ages about the subject, and what it was that could possibly have made the whole family up and leave in the middle of the night in the way that they obviously did. Your grandmother overheard our conversation, and told us that under no circumstances should we ever go near the Ericson family home. She said that if the rumours were even remotely true, it would be wise to keep away from the place.
So do you think Granny also thought the place was haunted? I asked.
Well, I don't know about that. But she did tell us to stay away from the property. She thought something bad must have happened for the Ericsons to up and leave in the way they did in the middle of the night. My father said much the same at the time. He said, "You heard your mother. You must listen to her advice. Don't go near the place if you know what's good for you."
"Oh, dear me," said my mother. "Goodness gracious me, your parents were desperately naive. They were fueling the fire, weren't they? Stoking up the flames of encouragement. Did they not realize telling two teenagers not to do something will mean their teenagers will do just that?"
"You're exactly right, sweetheart. That is what happened to me and Gareth. I guess our parents telling us to stay the hell away from the Ericson place, well, it stoked up our interest and curiosity. Me and my brother, being typical teenagers, were naturally fascinated and intrigued by anything remotely mysterious. So we decided to visit the house during the day. We knew the Ericsons had organized a removal company to clear out the house, so when we went to the place, there was nothing there. Every room was empty. Nothing seemed remotely untoward. To tell you the truth, I was rather disappointed about that. The house didn't seem at all spooky. But then Gareth reminded me that it's often at night that ghostly activity is activated. He said to me,
"You don't go to a haunted cemetery during the day, do you? Well, maybe some people do. But if you want to see something paranormal, then you have to go to the place at night, don't you?"
That is when we both promptly decided that we would visit the Ericson house at night, and that is what we did. Something that your Uncle Gareth was later to very much regret.
At this point, my father began wringing his hands together in a self-soothing gesture, almost as if it pained him to tell us his story. He paused for a moment and then continued.
"Well, Gareth set his alarm for 12 o'clock that night, so that he'd wake me up. We had decided we would clandestinely sneak out of the laundry room window and grab our bicycles from the shed, and then navigate our way down those sequestered country roads, cycling to the Ericson house, of course. Gareth was more excited than I was about this intrepid adventure. I was not so keen, as during the day our visit to the house had left me certain that the place was not remotely haunted. Even during the day you'd have expected a place reputed to being haunted to feel creepy and to pick up on some unsettling energy of some kind. But the Ericson house appeared benevolent and very calm, I think. I remember when my brother woke me up, I was very annoyed with him. He was telling me,
"Get up! We're going to the haunted house."
I begged him for us to take a rain check and turned over to go back to sleep. But Gareth was having none of that. So he went to the bathroom to get a bucket of cold water and threw it all over my face and body. I wasn't best pleased.
"He did what?" asked my mother.
"Well, he threw a bucket of cold water over my face and upper torso," said my father.
"Good Lord! I guess you did wake up after that."
"Well, I certainly did, and I wasn't remotely pleased. I actually cursed at Gareth. I suppose he was scared that if he didn't force me out of bed, that I would refuse to join him on our adventure. He was looking so forward to going to the Ericson property. I think he's always been fascinated about ghosts for as long as I could remember. Anyway, I had to get up at this point.
I was shivering with the cold, soaked to the skin I was. Once I'd changed my soaking clothes, I was very much wide awake. I reluctantly agreed to go with Gareth. He was very excited, you know. He really was hoping that he'd have a paranormal encounter that night, and he had an admirable attitude on him of great expectation. I think he'd always longed to have a ghostly encounter. I was sure he'd be very disappointed when we came back home after visiting the Erickson house. But I didn't have the heart to crush his enthusiasm. I believed all the rumour-mongering at school about the Erickson place being haunted had been blown all out of proportion. But I could see Gareth absolutely believed the place was alive with paranormal activity. I'd never seen him look so enthusiastic before. His eyes were so animated. I remember telling him not to get his hopes up, because if we hadn't encountered anything strange at the Ericksons' house during the day, why would it not be the same at night? I don't think my brother and I had even got out of the house in the middle of the night like this, without our parents knowing about our whereabouts. Luckily, my mother and father were sound asleep in their beds at this time. We had 2 French bulldogs that could bark the place down potentially, if we made any noise in the house. But my brother had them in the barn. He'd put them in there earlier on in the evening, given them some food, and it seemed that they had been distracted by that and fallen fast asleep. They weren't making any noise. It was tenebrific that night. As in these parts there were no street lights, of course, only a scattering of farmhouses, all reasonably far apart. So the only thing we had were lights from our torches. I didn't feel any sense of trepidation or anxiety when we left the house, but Gareth was inflamed with excitement. He'd always been a lot more intuitive than I was. Maybe it's because he's always been more artistically inclined. He said he had a profound sense that tonight we would meet our very first ghost. But why was Gareth so eager to encounter a ghost? My mother asked. I don't think you understand, darling, how completely titillated Gareth was about anything connected to the paranormal. He'd go to the library, take out library books. Some of them had pictures of so-called ghosts that had been caught on camera by accident. Gareth was so intrigued by all of this. He genuinely believed that the Ericksons' house was haunted, and that they had been driven away from their home in the middle of the night by an incensed ghost. And I suppose his inquiring mind wanted to get to the bottom of this enigmatic mystery, one way or another. But I was not so keen on this, I have to say. So you weren't feeling the same sense of enthusiasm, were you? My mother asked. Absolutely not. In truth, while I was interested in subjects that involved some kind of mystery, I was cynical that ghosts actually existed. In truth, I thought we would return from our trip to the Ericksons' house very disappointed, as we had been during the day. I guess I was in for a rude awakening. I had no way of knowing that it wasn't ghosts I needed to worry about, but something infinitely more paradoxical and intriguing that would not have crossed the blood-brain barrier of my thinking for a single second, let me tell you. Anyway, moving on with the story. Gareth and I crawled out of the window. Now, Gareth was very clever like that. He had literally taken part of the window apart. My parents knew nothing about this in the laundry. And we managed to get out of the bicycle shed, the 2 bicycles we had in there. The bicycle shed was full of lawn mowers, rowing boats, old paints and stuff like that. But we managed to remove the bicycles as noiselessly as we could. It was a full moon that night, and with the lights on our bicycles and with the assistance of the light from our torches, we managed to cycle down those country lanes. I'd never been cycling at night before, and I have to admit it was exhilarating. We were alone on this country road, you see, being serenaded by the sounds of crickets and frogs. And then there was the Milky Way, with its scattering of stars and luminescent light from the moon that spilled over the road. So it was rather enchanting. There was a cool wind blowing, and it was wrestling with my sweater, nudging at the back of my neck. But I think the cycling helped me warm up considerably. We did finally reach our destination, which the family had abandoned a year before. So the house was still in very good condition, although the yard had become increasingly overgrown and rather neglected. We trampled awkwardly over the footpath that finally led to the front door. I suddenly, for reasons I cannot explain, felt very spooked. All I can say is I was hit with this overwhelming sense of foreboding, and a sense that somebody was watching us, that we were not alone. It was as if the Erickson place was cocooned by a foreboding sense of disquiet, such as we'd never encountered during the day. In that moment, I wondered if my brother was right, and if the Ericksons' house was possibly haunted after all. It was swaddled by tall, lofty trees on every side, of course, which you know, I'm sure. That's why it seemed so menacing, I suspect. I vividly recall a nasty chill running down the back of my spine. I got the overwhelming sense that we shouldn't be there. A little voice in my head was telling me to leave at once, that something was terribly wrong, that something was amiss. I kept turning around very nervously and looking behind me, with the light of my torch, and I would scan the trees, looking for any sign of movement. But all was still, and it was almost too quiet for comfort. I was convinced that something was standing behind one of the trees, watching us. But every time I turned around, which I did on numerous occasions, I must say, and I would flash my torchlight over the trees, but there was nothing there, which did make me feel a tad silly, as if I was overreacting about nothing. I was about to tell Gareth about my burgeoning reservations that left me feeling extremely uncomfortable, but he was otherwise preoccupied with getting into the house, and barely noticed my disquiet. I could see he was practically shaking with excitement. He looked at me and said with bright, shiny eyes, "I told you this place would be different at night. See, I was right. You can tell this place is definitely haunted. I can feel we're not alone. You feel it too?" I asked him. "Of course I feel it. I've got a great feeling we're going to see something tonight. Isn't that brilliant? I'm glad I persuaded you to come with me. You're not going to be disappointed, bro. Tonight we're going to encounter our first ghost. The same ghost that probably scared the Ericksons away from this property. Look, Gareth, I'm not sure that I want to see anything," I told him. "I think we should go back home, I really do. Something doesn't feel right about this place. Maybe it's a thrill for you to encounter a ghost, but I'm not sure I actually want to." Gareth glared at me. I've never seen him look at me the way he did that night. He snorted dismissively. "You're not going to let me down, bro. I won't let you. You hear me? This is an opportunity of a lifetime to see something others never get to see. And you want to turn it down? Are you completely insane?" "I'm not insane, Gareth," I told him. "I'm being sensible, aren't I? Something about the Erickson place is foreboding. It's like the house doesn't want us here. Oh, don't overreact, Peter. We're going to have an experience here tonight. You'll never forget it. And one day you'll thank me for it, I promise." I do remember the last time we visited the Erickson house during the day. We found the front door key lying under the mat. Gareth was now looking under the mat for the key, and he frowned. "The key's not here," he said. "Where is it?" I stepped forward and just automatically pushed the door. I couldn't believe it when it actually creaked open. Gareth's face broke into a big smile. "Well done, bro! I had no idea the house had been left open." Me and my brother gingerly entered the house. It only possessed a few scant furnishings, of course, that the Erickson family had left behind, for reasons I do not know. Perhaps these were things they no longer wanted. In the bedroom, which I guessed must have belonged to Tony Erickson, there was a large worn-out bureau. I do remember, very clearly, although I don't know if it's still there, of course, but on the surface of the bureau was this huge concrete-shaped object. It was very intriguing. It looked like an antique covered in dust, and was on display next to some interesting shells, stones, pieces of driftwood, some old pennies, and some rusty-looking things, which looked pretty antique as well. So I guessed that Tony had collected these things for himself, but had left them behind in the house. I was very tempted to take that large, antique-shaped object back home with me,
but I knew it didn't belong to me, so I couldn't do that. I was surprised the family left such a lovely piece of furniture behind in terms of the antique bureau. We went around the house, and everything seemed benign, and just as it should be. I wondered why we'd bothered to come here. In the first place, the feeling of being haunted had suddenly abandoned me the moment we'd entered the house. In truth, the interior felt no different to how it had felt during the day, and there was nothing spooky about the place that would lead me to believe it was haunted. I was about to tell this to my brother, and that our plan in coming here had been futile after all. And if we wanted to have some ghost-like interaction, we'd be better off going to a cemetery or playing with a Ouija board, although the latter would have creeped me out for sure, as playing with a Ouija board would scare me, because you can call up things into our reality that you might not be able to finally get rid of. It was as I was thinking this, there was this massive banging on the front door. It was so earth-shatteringly loud, it would have made the banging that Mrs. Sanderson made on our door the other night seem almost mute. It was to date possibly the most terrifying sound I have ever heard, as if we were being ambushed by some dangerous thugs. Gareth, of course, went as white as a sheet, the colour completely drained from his skin. I've never seen him look like that before. The torch he was holding nearly slipped out of his hand like butter, because he practically jumped out of his skin.
"What the hell? Did you hear that, Peter? Someone's at the door! Someone's at the door! And whoever they are, they don't sound remotely friendly. I'm really scared. I'm really scared, Peter. You're right. We shouldn't have come here."
"Shh," I said.
"Don't make a sound. We don't want them to know we're here, do we?"
Me and my brother were looking for somewhere to hide. We ran towards some velvety-looking curtains in the living room and hid behind them. We knew that whoever was knocking at the door could easily come in if they pushed it open, so we felt somewhat cornered, for there was nowhere to escape, and very little places to hide in a house that was empty of all its furnishings, and let's just say all the windows were far too small to squeeze through for us. I guess we sensed we were in imminent danger. That was when we heard the door violently being thrust open. We could hear ominous movements in the house, shuffling, heavy feet thumping across the wooden floors, and it didn't just sound like one pair of feet, but it sounded like several, and those feet were moving towards us, and it made me want to wet myself, let me tell you. I surreptitiously took a peek behind the curtain, and that was when I saw these massive forms moving around the house, clearly looking for us. I couldn't identify what these things were, but they were humongous in size and stature, and I was intimidated. Let me tell you, I really did believe we were toast. I wanted to run out of that house as fast as I possibly could, by heading straight for the door, but I was too terrified. I couldn't even flinch. I was unable to move a muscle. It was almost like my feet were anchored to one spot, like a boat in its mooring place. My body shook like a leaf, my teeth chattered, and my heart thundered in my ears. When I glanced over at Gareth, his eyes were earnestly wide. They took up his entire face. He was trembling uncontrollably, so much so that the wooden floors beneath his feet began to vibrate and groan, which gave away our hiding place, I'm most sure. These beings, whatever they were, appeared to me to be like giant shadow people. They were indistinct, so to speak. I think that me and Gareth instinctively knew that these shadow beings were looking for us. And then the worst thing happened, the worst thing imaginable. The feet started to move towards us. In that quintessential moment, I closed my eyes ever so tightly. I was terribly afraid of what I would see or what would happen next. In truth, I was sure that me and Gareth were both dead, and that we'd never get to leave the Erickson house in the same way that we had entered it. Then one of those shadow beings ripped the curtain back. I could hear a tearing sound, and there were 4 gargantuan figures standing side by side, along with 4 pairs of eyes. I couldn't see them very clearly, but they began to yell at us in what appeared to be an incomprehensible language of sorts. But I felt they were telling us to get the hell out. "Ninata! Ninata! Ninata!"
I could see these black eyes glaring at us furiously. They gave off this red eye shine. These things were intimidating, let me tell you. I could barely move. Not even flinch. I was beyond petrified. Me and Gareth were looking at 4 very huge Bigfoot. They were not remotely friendly towards us. They seemed angry. They kept shouting one word at us again and again, which I'm pretty sure meant get out. I thought they would lash out at us and strike us, harm us in some way. But they continued to yell at us. They pounded their fists against their chests, which so often is seen in silverback gorillas in the wild, when they're expressing their dominance, or extreme indignance, I suspect. One of the Bigfoots grabbed me impulsively by the collar. He thrust me forward, and then grabbed my brother and did the same, pushing us across the floor. And that was when we didn't need further encouragement. We ran like greased lightning through the house, out of the front door. I've never been so afraid. I ran for my life like I've never run before. I'm glad to say that the adrenaline finally did kick in, although it was taking its time for sure. These 4 Bigfoot began chasing after us and shouting in this strange language. It was like they were deliberately trying to scare us half to death. But the funny thing is they never harmed us, and they easily could have done so. I do not know why they pursued us like this, but my only feeling was that they wanted us to stay the hell away from the Ericksons' house. When we got on our bicycles, they stood there watching us very silently. They stopped chasing us, and in that moment, the leader shouted something out after us. I knew it was the leader because he was so much bigger than the other 3 Bigfoot, and I think he was saying, "Don't ever come back if you know what's good for you." I was not sure if these Bigfoots were territorial, or what their problem was, as they weren't happy with us entering the Erickson house, for reasons I do not understand. I'm pretty sure these sizable Bigfoot drove the Ericksons away from their property, as they abandoned their house and never came back, and now they were chasing us off the property in the same way. Me and my brother instinctively bounced onto our bicycles and cycled back home at a speed I've never been able to replicate since. I don't think either of us could believe what had happened. I barely remember that cycle ride home. It was a blur to me, let me tell you. Anyway, I was just so shocked and traumatized by the event, but my brother was much more so than I was. He told me not to speak of the matter ever again. I told him that if the Bigfoots had intended to harm us, they could have done so already. But he didn't want to talk about it at all. He completely shut me down. He said, "Bigfoots don't exist, and this never ever happened. And if you say it did, I will deny it and tell everyone you're a big fat liar. We're never going to talk about this again. Do you understand, Peter?" "But why?" I asked him. "Why don't you want to talk about what happened?" Gareth grabbed me by the collar and shook me violently hard. I nearly lost my balance, let me tell you. "Don't you dare tell anyone what happened tonight. I don't want to speak of this matter again." My mother did ask me what was up with Gareth. He was behaving very strangely after that event, locking himself up in his bedroom for hours on end, refusing to talk to anyone. For a long time he slipped into a deep depression and pretty much ignored both friends and family. My mother sent him to a counsellor, and that was when he confessed to my parents that he was gay. My mother said she always assumed that Gareth was gay, and it had never bothered her in the slightest. So she put down his strange, sulky behaviour, down to the fact that he'd been reluctant to admit of his sexual orientation for so long. But I didn't buy that for a single second. I knew what had really traumatized my brother, but we never spoke of the paradoxical experience again. And I know if I had done so, he would have shut me down in an instant and told me I was talking all but nonsense. Gareth is like that, you see. If he doesn't want you to talk about something that has upset him, he'll completely clam up. I know you know him as this gregarious, effervescent individual, but there is a side of him that is extremely secretive, and if he doesn't want to talk about something that has upset him in the past, he'll just close down, let me tell you." "Goodness gracious me," said my mother. "Poor Gareth. He didn't take the encounter with the Bigfoots well, did he? But I can't say I blame him. In the same situation, I would have been terrified myself. It's all rather ironic, isn't it? He was so dreadfully excited about your adventure that night, and then everything went completely pear-shaped for the two of you, when you were both chased away from the Erickson property by 4 burly Bigfoot that didn't seem best pleased with you. That would have terrified anyone, I'm most sure. It's a remarkable story you've shared with us tonight, Peter, but I wish you'd told us about this a long time ago. If it makes you feel any better, I am certain that those Bigfoots did not want to harm you or your brother, because if they had wanted to, they could have done so, and they didn't. But they did seem to want to drive you away from the Erickson property. And the big question is, why? Maybe they're territorial, I said. Perhaps they want the place to themselves. That is a possibility, Ernest, my mother admitted. You do get animals that are territorial, and people as well. So there's no reason why Bigfoot shouldn't be territorial. But personally, I would have thought creatures such as Bigfoot would move around, following food and water sources. Why would they become attached to somebody's house? I'm not sure what the Bigfoot were after that night. But I'm certain of one thing, Peter, that you and your brother were not in danger. If they'd meant to harm you, they would have done so. I mean, think about Mrs. Sandalson's encounter for a moment. Now, she wasn't harmed in any way, was she? The Bigfoot actually leapt to her defense, attacked that wolf-like humanoid, and told her to go away. Perhaps the Bigfoot were being protective towards you and your brother. Well, I don't know what happened that night, and I have to accept the fact that I'll never understand it, said my father. But you're right. If the Bigfoot had wanted to harm us, they'd have probably done so. It's your brother Gareth I feel so desperately sorry for, my mother said reflectively. It's not good for him to bury his trauma away like this. I wish he'd talk about his experience to someone. It might make him feel a whole lot better. Don't you dare do a thing like that, darling. You might think you know my brother well, but if you ask him about his Bigfoot encounter, he won't be happy at all. I'm in no doubt he will deny it even happened. I think he buried the memory away for good reason. I don't think it would be wise to bring the subject up to him. He won't be impressed. He'll think I betrayed his trust. As far as he's concerned, it never happened, and that's the way he wants it to stay. Gareth may be all out there with his effusive gestures, and his clientele all but love him. But they don't know that there is another side to Gareth, a side that nobody else knows except for me. As you can imagine, for me and my brother William, after hearing about my father's incredulous encounter with 4 very burly Bigfoot, we became increasingly fascinated about the Erickson property, a subject that we'd never been interested in before. The house was situated a short cycle ride from our home. I think over the years we'd pretty much ignored the old abandoned place, although I think we did look at the property at one point in time very briefly in passing. But after my father's story, our interest in the place was piqued. I had known about the Ericksons abandoning their property all those years ago, and never returning. I had learnt that they had sent some removal men to pick up some furniture, knickknacks and clothes, but for some reason they'd never removed the worn-out bureau from their son's bedroom, which in itself was profoundly odd, as that bureau was a valuable piece of furniture, and I'd seen it myself when visiting the house a few years earlier. By all accounts, when me and my brother were alone together, we would often talk about my father's paradoxical encounter with 4 very lofty Bigfoot. The more we reflected over the story, the more intrigued we naturally became. Why were 4 Bigfoot dead set on driving my father and Uncle Gareth away from an abandoned property? Why were they so fixated on this place? Mum's right, said my brother William. There's no way those Bigfoot intended to harm Dad and Uncle Gareth. If that were the case, they would be dead by now, and we'd never have been born, and that's a horrible thought. And then Dad would never have met Mum. Your Dad and Gareth were physically dragged away from the curtains and pushed towards the front door. That's a clear sign to me that the Bigfoot wanted them to leave. In those vital seconds, they could have been killed, but they weren't. Think about it for a moment. The Ericsons were frightened away from their home deliberately. Mum's right. Those Bigfoot scared them away from the property. But the big question is, why would they do that? That's what I want to know. What is so special about the Ericson place? By Jove, you're right, William. I hadn't thought of that before. Those Bigfoot wanted them out. They purposely drove them away, rather like a sheepdog driving away a wandering sheep, so that it returns safely back to the herd. I have an idea, said William, but I'm not sure you're going to like it, Ernest. You are rather inclined to be a little freaked out by things, but I'm going to say it anyway. What's that supposed to mean? I said rather indignantly. Are you suggesting I'm a wuss or something? I'm not saying that, said William, but you are a lot more cautious than I am. You have to admit that. That may be true, but I'm still not a wuss. What is this idea of yours? How badly do you want to see a Bigfoot? My brother asked, his eyes growing wide. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, William, but I don't want to see a Bigfoot. Dad's experience is enough for me. He had a hell of a time when he encountered those 4 burly Bigfoot, and I wouldn't like the same thing to happen to me. It would freak me out. Look at Uncle Gareth. He's sitting on a secret that he refuses to talk about, refuses to admit even happened. I mean, that is how affected he is by that encounter. And you're suggesting I'd want one? Well, if I saw a Bigfoot, said my brother, I'd keep the encounter to myself, of course I would. I wouldn't be stupid enough to share my story with anyone else. You know what people are like. They'd laugh at you, think you were making it up as you were going along. People can be so cynical, you know. Some secrets are best not shared, and this is one of them. I can fully understand why Dad didn't even want to share his Bigfoot encounter with Mum. He's been sitting on this secret for years. The only reason he shared his story with us was because Mrs. Sanderson had an absurd encounter with a Bigfoot, and he wanted us to know that she wasn't lying about it. So do you want to see a Bigfoot or not? No, I don't, I said. Of course I believe they exist. I know they're real because of Dad's encounter. But I'm sorry, I don't want to have an encounter of my own. After what Dad told us, no thank you very much. So you're a wuss then, said my brother. You must be one of the most unadventurous people I know. That's not fair, William. I'm not a wuss, and I resent you implying that I am one. If I say I don't want to see a Bigfoot, it's not because I'm a wuss. It's because I don't fancy having an encounter with that creature. Is that so hard for you to understand? What's wrong with you, bro? I'm younger than you, and I've got more balls in my right toe than you have in your entire body. That's not true. I've got balls, I said, knowing even as my brother told me this, that he was absolutely right. I was actually a coward. Then prove it, bro. Let me see how big your balls actually are. William challenged me. So what is it you want me to do to prove I'm not a wuss? I said, sarcastically rolling my eyes. Let me guess. I think I've got you figured out. You want us to follow in Dad and Uncle Gareth's footsteps, don't you? You want us to go exploring the Ericsons' house in the middle of the night like they did all those years ago. But I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, William. No way is that going to happen. I'm not going to go with you, period. Not because I'm a wuss, but because I've actually got some common sense. See, I told you, you're a wuss, said my brother. No, I'm not, I said defensively. Well then, prove it to me. Show me that you're not. I tell you what we'll do. We can repeat what Dad and Gareth did all those years ago. We'll go to the Ericson house in the middle of the night and see whether any Bigfoot comes after us to turf us out of the house. Are you insane, William? Surely you know if you play with fire you're going to get burnt. Everybody knows that, I said. Look, bro, there's no guarantee we'll encounter a Bigfoot, like Uncle Gareth and Dad did all those years ago. But as far as I'm concerned, if we visit the abandoned property in the middle of the night, we have a greater opportunity to encounter something than at any other place around here. The Bigfoots didn't want the Ericsons in that house for some reason, nor did they want Dad and Gareth all those years ago. So there has to be a reason why they want to turf everybody away from the place. We should go and investigate it, don't you think? You're kidding me, William. You really want us to go and investigate the Erickson property, do you? You really want to have another encounter with a Bigfoot like Dad did all those years ago? I don't think so, I said, shaking my head furiously. I don't fancy being chased away from the property by a team of Bigfoot. Are you kidding me? See, I told you you're a wuss, said my brother. I might have known you were far too lame to consider taking on an adventure like this. You're so predictable. We probably wouldn't even encounter a Bigfoot. But if we don't go exploring, then we won't even have a chance to encounter anything. You heard about Mrs. Sandalson's encounter the other night. The Bigfoot never harmed her, did he? It means that Bigfoot are in this area. The 4 Bigfoot Dad and Uncle Gareth encountered didn't harm them either. So what do we have to worry about? The worst that can happen is we'll be chased away from the Erickson property. And I'm up for that. Well, I'm glad you think that's cool. I certainly don't. You've got a warped idea about what cool is. Those Bigfoots seriously harmed Uncle Gareth, I may remind you. Emotionally. Think about it. He doesn't ever talk about his encounter. He was spooked by the event. He told Dad that he's going to pretend it never happened. Gareth went completely grey at a young age. And my bet it's because of the encounter he had with those Bigfoots. It's not something you should trivialise, you know. Don't you get it? My brother said indignantly. The Bigfoot Mrs. Sandalson encountered saved her from that wolfman. He told her to go. It's obvious he never intended to harm her. Get that into your thick head, will you? On the contrary, he may actually have saved her life. If that wolfman had caught up with Mrs. Sandalson, who had shot at him and provoked the creature to anger, she might not be here anymore. You do realise that, don't you? So there we are. That is the end of part 3 of our story. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.